All right, everyone. The president of South Korea has once again urged peace in Korea and an official end to the Korean War, at least as far as the two Koreas are concerned. This is what we need, and this is definitely a refreshing sort of thing, because for a while there it looked like North and South Korea, their relationship had gone back to the bad old norm that it was at before. The real long-lasting impact, I think, though, of Trump's efforts in the region, I think, and I've said this before, I think at first he wanted to broker a peace deal in Israel, between Israel and Palestine. When he realized that that was going to take years, he resigned himself to the next best thing, which is to say, well, we've got the Korean War technically not over since the mid-1950s. Why don't I put my diplomatic effort there? He became the first U.S. president to cross into North Korea. He became the first president, I believe, to really hold more of an interpersonal meeting with Kim Jong-un. But I think more sufficient than that, because that's just symbolism. It's just basically, you're saying you're showing some degree of mutual respect, and that goes a long way, and especially in East Asian diplomacy. But it doesn't seal the deal. The biggest thing, though, is between the DPRK and the ROK, and I think what he expected was that they would take the fore and begin negotiating, and they did. Things got rocky there for the last year, basically, but now you've got a renewed attempt by the Republic of Korea to formally end hostilities there. If a peace deal is reached, the United States no longer really needs to worry about the nuclear situation as much. You don't worry so much about countries you're not hostile with having nuclear weapons now, do you? It might still be a tyrannical, authoritarian rogue state, but it's one that would be more recognized, more stable. There would be more travel, more trade, more diplomacy. It would be easier. Going forward, it would be much more easy to take care of the situation permanently, whether it involves reunification or a two-state solution or whatever it happens to take the form of. And I think Trump expected that to happen, and it did. You've got numerous landmine removals along the DMZ. You've had a silencing of the guns, so to speak. Some of the artillery and tanks and stuff have been withdrawn. Border posts have been removed. Remains have been repatriated to their respective countries. For at least a year there, you had an era of good feels, so to speak. It is not odd to me that North Korea decided to resume launching missiles and issuing vague threats to other nations. It's just sort of a thing that happens. And it's really, at the end of the day, it doesn't cause any actual violence and bloodshed. What we need to be aware of is the possibility of a nuclear accident. A radar system malfunctions. Somebody in a bunker presses the wrong button. Something like that is capable of happening. This is a risk even with the most sophisticated nations in the sense of technology. Wasn't it back in the Jimmy Carter era? I think I read about this once. There was a situation where they loaded the wrong cassette, and a missile simulation, like a World War simulation where the Russians are launching nukes, was accidentally uploaded to the wrong system, and so it was registering it as though it actually happened. And if it weren't for somebody in the office sort of figuring out that it was they loaded the wrong disk or something, we could have had World War III. Cuban Missile Crisis, a lower Russian sub-commander averted catastrophe by refusing to be one of the three officers aboard. They all had to agree to press launch, and one of them held out and said, well, I'm not convinced that the fact that our radio system right now isn't working is evidence that everything's been nuked. Thankfully, his recognition was true. I think he got awarded for that. People don't even know that about history. They don't know how close we came to Armageddon multiple times. We've got more nations now with nukes. We've got more sophisticated nuclear systems in some of them. Some of these states are not entirely stable, and many of them are run by regimes that aren't quite with it. China's not quite with it. They don't really have, the Chinese government, apparent respect for human life. Look at what happened with coronavirus. If peace can break out in the Korean Peninsula, it'll be great. It would be wonderful if people could travel to Pyongyang and not worry about getting thrown in the rock quarry or something. That would be kind of cool. To be able to see a country that's sort of been time-locked as well since the 50s. Basically, the only similar country you have is Cuba. Cuba's semi-open now, at least to most people. I think elements of the embargo were slapped back on after that embassy incident. I don't really agree with that myself, but who cares? Cuba doesn't have atomic weapons. It's a little bit different. They don't have a first world military. Say what you want about North Korea as far as their artillery and their tanks and the number of subs they have, by the way. They pack a punch. It would be nice if there could finally be peace there and there was one less flashpoint in the world. We've already got problems. You've got the flashpoint between Pakistan, India, China. You've got China, Taiwan. That's a flashpoint, potentially. Everything around Iran. Most of the Middle East. Parts of North Africa. Russia on its borders with Eastern Europe. Of course, Venezuela could be a flashpoint. You've got plenty of problems in the world in the diplomatic military sense. Anytime you can eliminate one, it makes the world incrementally safer. It makes things incrementally more hospitable to human life, and it makes it less likely that the doomsday clock hits midnight. I think that's a great thing. Now, is this going to be meaningful? I don't know. This requires now a response from the DPRK. He's going before the UN. He's trying to convince the UN to help broker a peace deal. The problem is the DPRK is not going to deal with the UN. They are much more likely, if the UN takes a backseat, much like the US has recently over the last couple of years, the ROK and DPRK largely hashing it out. They need to hash it out first. It's their Korea. Most of the time, people in superpower countries, they always think that if they're involved in a fight, that they're the primary actor. The US is not the primary actor in Korea. The Korean peninsula is run by two civic entities. They're the primary actors. China backs the DPRK. It used him as a puppet, as a buffer state for years, now has largely given that up. The United States backed South Korea. But we're the backers. We're the money and the guns, but we're not the people that live on the peninsula. Well, other than all the foreign troops stationed in these countries, but we're not the ones that run these countries. They have to deal with it diplomatically. It's their responsibility. I would say that the United States should make it clear that if there's a peace effort, we will back it, as long as it has amiable terms and isn't full of shit. And the Chinese, of course, they'll come along, they'll say the same thing. Those are the primary backing countries. The UN is tertiary to the situation. I don't even know why he's doing this and not asking Trump. Maybe it's because Trump doesn't get along as much with Kim Jong-un anymore. But that's to be expected. I'm sure Putin would be more of a neutral party than the UN, arguably, to broker a peace deal, but if he gets involved, the US has to take a hands-off approach, because Trump doesn't want to have to be too much in proximity to Putin because of various political ramifications. By the way, if Trump is reelected, there is a likelihood we can secure peace, or rather help secure it in Korea. Biden would probably start a war. Biden is itching. He's got an itchy trigger finger, and I'm sure that Harris does, because if President Harris will want to show she's one of the boys, so to speak, I guarantee if Biden's elected, he'll resign or die in office, Harris will become president, and we will have a major war. That is a guarantee. You take it to the bank, dude. That's another reason to vote for Donald Trump. That's about all. Peace out.